Oh god, that video was amazing. I gotta say, I love White Raw.
Dude,
And,
he is the man. I actually, if I can grow up and be like a tenth of what White Raw is, my life will be perfect.
We can only dream. White Raw, I will say, is one of my absolute favorite personalities in the community. If you've been to an event, I think everyone has a story about White Raw. If you've been to any events, Sean, do you have any stories that you need to share with us about White Raw?
I like your use of the word need. It's not stories that I'd like to share, but stories that I just have to tell.
If you've been keeping it inside this whole time, it's time to let that bird fly.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about player interviews. So there's this, you know, as a caster, you know, a lot of times you'll end up doing player interviews, and that can be really stressful because, you know, people have seen this with sports athletes, esports athletes, anyone whose job it is to be good at a thing and not to talk. It's a real problem when you try to get them on the air and you want to ask them a really impassioned question, and a lot of people just get really nervous and lock up.
It would be like me playing StarCraft on the MLG stage. That would not be pretty.
Yeah. Like that's actually like a great example. Is it like the feeling of playing and performing in front of an audience? Yeah, it's like terrifying the first time like you get out and someone asks you a question and you're like not ready for it. So you learn that when you're doing an interview, you can't say, you know, how did you prepare? And then stop, because most of the time people will be like, I logged onto the internet, and I played there. So the way you end up structuring questions is you'll make it a long question with a lot of stuff going on in it. So hopefully the player has some sort of meat to cling on to. So hey, going into this, your win rate versus Protoss was kind of low. We've been seeing you practice a lot of that late game style, and we got the chance to see that come out today. I mean, when you were practicing for it, were you focusing on that style, or were you preparing specifically against the player? And that's why a lot of interviewers do those long questions, so the players don't give one-word answers.
That is.
And then they still do. So there's always this problem where you do this long question, and the player's like, well, I tried to train hard, and I won. You're like, oh, let's try again with another question. So White Raw is actually the exact opposite of that, where you're like, White Raw, you showed a great game today, and then you inhale because you're about to do your long section, and then White Raw actually grabs the mic, holds it to his mouth, and talks for like 2 minutes straight enthusiastically. And I almost feel a little guilty that we subtitled his English with English, but there's that accent, the way he talks has like such enthusiasm that no matter what, everyone loves him. He is like far and away my favorite player to interview, and the crowd always goes nuts.
Sean, I gotta say, maybe next time you interview him, don't even open with a question. Just be like, White Raw, you look great today. And he will still probably just fly with you. You don't even have to ask him questions in interviews. I do have a White Raw story. I'll try and keep it just a little bit shorter. I'm not proud of this story. Your story was much better. But so I was I think it was an MLG, and we had just casted all day. And I'm also not proud of the fact that I have a series on my channel called Lay Down Interview, where I lay down with players and interview them. It's very awkward and very fun. And White Raw called me up on my phone. I don't even know how he got my number, but I could tell immediately by his accent who it was. And he's like, hey, I have Demaga here. We're going to do an interview. I want you to do this. It's going to be awesome.
I know this story.
Yeah, and I actually shouldn't tell it. I should just end it there.
No, don't stop. I'll tell it if you don't.
And so he calls me up, and when White Raw tells you something, you just take it at face value, because White Raw would never lie to you. He would never hurt a soul. So I'm like, White Raw, this is great. Come up to my room. And so he brought him up, because I was like, I can also interview White Raw. This is going to be a twofer. And so he brought up Demaga. We lay down in bed. We're all cuddling, having fun, doing our interview. It's about a 15, 20-minute interview. And then White Raw is like laughing the entire time. And I'm like, man, I'm on it. My jokes are good. My questions are good. This is the best interview ever. And
you were asking Demaga about like his life and how he trained for the tournament, and how he dealt with ups and downs,
and how his games were, and his exactly. So I was asking him some hard-hitting questions: who his favorite players were, who he loves training with. We were diving deep into Demaga, and then that interview was over. I was like, awesome. And then I interviewed White Raw, and White Raw's so giggly the whole time. I'm like, God, these guys love me. This is like the best experience ever.
I'm so good at my job.
And so after 30 minutes of interviewing both of them, they pieced out, they left, and then White Raw calls me up like 2 minutes later, and he's like crying, he's laughing so hard, and he was like, Husky, I wasn't going to tell you, but I felt so bad. That was actually Carmack, who was wearing Demaga's clothes, and they were trolling the hell out of me the entire time. So that was when you get trolled good, you just have to sit back and be like, they got me. He was even wearing his coat.
Did you upload that video?
No, that one was actually lost, and I'm really sad about that. I'm really sad, and people give me a hard time. They're like, oh yeah, sure it was lost, Husky. But it actually was. Our flip cam, it like overheats a lot and then just stops working.
Oh gosh.
So unfortunately it did that. So I'm sad, but I will be the first to admit that they trolled the hell out of me. And if you don't believe me, Google like Carmack IEM. It should bring up some pictures.
Yeah, CARMAC.
Yeah, and then Google Dimaga.
DIMAGA.
And they imagine him wearing. They look so similar that I'm okay admitting this. And White Raw is amazing. And then I ran into him at the airport later, and it was like super awkward, but that's fine.
You know, I have another White Raw story, but we must, alas, go into the next video.
Yeah, we're going to be here for the first 5 hours just talking about White Raw.
Segment 1 of the community launch party is the White Raw half. You know, I will say that White Raw, of course, the one-man team.
Yep. Him and Grubby, man, rocking the individual teams there. And speaking of teams, of course, teams are a big part of StarCraft. Not everyone can be their own team. That would be kind of silly.
That's true.
And our next video is going to be talking about that a little bit, and it's going to be featuring Root Gaming. If you don't know who Root Gaming is, I don't know where you've been. They have like the coolest logo, so let's just go ahead and jump right on in.